This is a story that happened to me not too long ago. It was Halloween. There was a big 2-story house in our town which was rumored to be haunted. Out of curiosity, one of my best friends, Carlos, and I decided it would be a good idea to test out this rumor. So we went to that house for trick or treat. It was about 11:45 p.m., and it took us a while to get to the house as it was a bit far away from the other houses. When we arrived at the house, we rang the doorbell. A man who looked as if he was in his mid-30s suddenly came out. He opened the door almost right away. He had a cigarette in his hand. I could see that he was dressed in a hoodie and ripped jeans, and he looked kind of tired. My friend mentioned the rumor about his house being haunted. We laughed out loud, but he didn't reply to anything we said. He just stared at us, and then he said, "You kids are almost a little late for Halloween. It's going to end in 2 minutes." Well, he was right. It was almost 12 a.m. He then told us the candy was in his room and offered for us to come in. We sat on the living room couch waiting for the man who had gone upstairs. However, when he came back, he insisted on us going upstairs because he had Reese's chocolate, which was my favorite at the time. So, being a pretty mindless teenager, we took him up on the offer. We went upstairs following behind him and went into one of the dimly lit rooms. Right at that instant, I could see that there were a lot of different kinds of knives in the room. It looked as if the man were collecting knives. We thought it was a pretty cool hobby. The man approached us and gave us each 2 pieces of chocolate. Although he still didn't say anything, we thanked him and turned around to go downstairs. All of a sudden, Carlos screamed in pain and fell down the stairs. I turned around and saw the man was holding what appeared to be a red knife, which was probably one from his collection. With mixed emotions, my adrenaline immediately kicked in. I tried to punch the man in the face, but he turned back and then stabbed my leg. I barely managed to hold back the pain and literally knocked him out with 5 punches. The man collapsed. I took the knife out of my leg and started limping, holding Carlos in one arm. We finally escaped from that house. I could see that there was blood all over Carlos's back. With shaking hands, I called the police. As soon as they arrived, they arrested the man after he had regained consciousness. The ambulance took me and Carlos to the hospital. I wasn't hurt too bad, but Carlos was apparently stabbed twice in the back and bled out a lot. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks to recover. Sometime after I got out of the hospital, the police officer reported to my parents that the man had apparently been a registered sex offender and had raped a few children before. Luckily, he was sent to jail right after they arrested him. After all of that, I never went inside a stranger's house again. And to this day, I'm still afraid of what would have happened if I wasn't able to hold back the pain of being stabbed and had failed to escape from that man.
When I was a kid, I loved Halloween. I went trick-or-treating up until I was 12. My last time going trick-or-treating, I went with my friend Drew. He loved Halloween as much as I did. This Halloween, everyone seemed more wild than usual, but it was Halloween and that's how teenagers act, I guess. We went to a house that had a flashlight lit on the front porch, but no candy. We noticed that everyone stopped at the end of the walkway. They kept walking past the house once they noticed that there wasn't any candy. Not us. I told Drew we should check it out. Or should just let these people know to turn their light off because it's confusing people. Approaching the house, we noticed that none of the lights were on in the house. As Drew was set to knock on the door, one of the front windows raised just a little bit, and the blinds moved back about an inch. Drew put his hand down, and the both of us looked at the window. Then the voice said,
"Hey, just come in for the candy."
The door opened a bit, and by surprise, Drew walked in like a dummy. I asked him why he was going in, and he said, "I want some As he turned to answer me, Someone put their hands on his mouth. I immediately ran forward to help him, then I heard multiple voices yelling, "Grab him." The door shut. I could hear wrestling sounds. Drew was fighting these guys. I started yelling, screaming, and banging on the door, but I couldn't get in. I didn't have a cell phone, so I ran down the street asking people to help, and that my friend was in trouble. Everyone laughed and were telling me that they're not falling for it. I got a block away and I ran to a police officer. I told him what was going on, but he was very skeptical due to it being Halloween. He put me in his car, and I showed him where the house was. As we were pulling up to the house, I saw my friend's body on the front lawn with people just walking past. I started yelling and screaming to the cop that it was my friend and he needs the help. The police officer believed me once we got up to my friend. He was bloody. Luckily, he was alive, but those guys beat him pretty badly. Then they dropped his body and left. The police officer told us that the house was abandoned, and that's why we didn't notice any lights on. My friend is pretty much scarred for life, especially being that people were walking past him as if he were a Halloween ornament and laughing. But luckily, that cop listened to me. And honestly, I haven't celebrated Halloween since. This all happened 28 years ago, when I was 8 years old. My mother and my father would often take me to visit my grandparents for Halloween. My aunt lived 2 houses down from my grandparents, and I could go trick-or-treating with my cousins. Between my grandparents' place and my aunt's place, there was an old dilapidated house. We always skipped it when we went trick-or-treating Halloween night because the woman who lived there gave us the creeps. She was very big, like a huge woman. She was over 6 feet tall and wore chains around her neck and heavy work boots. There was obviously something very wrong with her. Whenever we went back and forth between my aunt's place and my grandparents' place, we always had to run past the woman's house because she was always standing at her windows watching us. It was so creepy that we never dared to run past her house alone. Sometimes the big woman would be outside of her house watering the garden or scrubbing the windows. When we ran past, she would shout and yell at us. She would tell us that the devil was coming for us. We told the adults about her, but they just told us to leave her alone and stay away from her. One Halloween, we were going trick-or-treating with my other older cousins. They dared us to go to the big woman's house and knock on her door. I remember being so afraid, but I didn't want to look like a coward, so I agreed. Dressed in our Halloween costumes, we walked up to her driveway and rang the doorbell. Suddenly, there was a lot of banging and slamming noises coming from the house. We were frightened, and I was about to run away when the door creaked open. The woman was standing there in the dim light. She was holding something in her hands, but when we saw what it was, we all ran screaming down the driveway. It looked like a human head. When we got home, we were all shaking and out of breath. Some of the younger kids were crying. The adults asked us what was wrong, and when we told them what we had seen, they just laughed at us, and they didn't take it serious. My grandfather said it was just a Halloween prop, and my grandmother told us we shouldn't be bothering that woman. After we all calmed down, we went outside again and continued trick-or-treating. However, we stayed away from that big woman's house. About a month later, my father got a phone call from my grandparents. They said that the big woman who lived next door had attacked my aunt. My aunt had just came home from shopping. She was carrying her groceries in one arm, and she had my baby cousin in her other arm. Just as she got to her front door, the big woman appeared out of nowhere. She had a rope saw and put it around my aunt's neck. My aunt flipped out and immediately dropped the groceries along with my baby cousin. My aunt managed to get her hands around the rope saw. She started kicking her front door with her feet as she struggled. Her husband heard all of the commotion, and when he saw what was happening, he ran outside and got the woman off of my aunt. My aunt survived the attack, but it left her with scars on her hands, along with scars across the front of her neck. Of course, the police were called, and they arrested the big woman. When they searched her house, they found something that shocked everybody in the area. The woman had been digging tunnels under her home, which came up under my aunt's house, my grandparents' house, and another neighbor's house. She had been bringing the dirt up and putting it in her flower beds in her garden. But that wasn't all. The most chilling discovery was that she had also built some kind of shrine under her house with candles and other stuff on it. At the center of the shrine was a real human head. Needless to say, it was the same head that we saw when we went trick-or-treating on Halloween night. She had already murdered one woman, and my aunt almost became the next severed head in her collection.
I used to own a small Halloween-themed shop that was located downtown in a fairly small city. And unlike many businesses in town after Walmart's arrival, my store never really suffered when it came to customers. Of course, it was only open for the month of October. I sold a lot of unique things you might find at other novelty stores in bigger cities, but for cheaper prices. I really didn't do it for profit as much as I did to celebrate the spooky Halloween spirit. I also love to celebrate that spirit by doing the best to scare the crap out of people every Halloween. On one particular Halloween, my chosen victim was my buddy Alex. He was a pretty relaxed and calm guy for most of the time, so he was the perfect person for the plan I had in mind. First, you should know that I always began packing up my store on Halloween fairly early in the morning, as it was unlikely to get customers on the holiday itself. I told Alex that I had much heavier merchandise that year and could use his help moving it all out. Not knowing what he was getting into, he accepted, and I told him to meet me at the shop around 10 p.m. sharp. As I said, Alex was a very relaxed and calm guy for most of the time. Well, unfortunately for him, he had once told me about his irrational fear of clowns and how he couldn't function around them. So naturally, my plan involved dressing up in a clown costume. When he would arrive at the shop, I would stand perfectly still like a statue. Once he realized he couldn't find me, he would then call me, most likely. But when my phone rang, it would be in the pocket of an apparent clown statue, and when he came over to investigate, I would give him my best scare. Pretty simple plan, right? Everything was set in motion. I dressed up and stood near the back of the store, obscured by some boxes and other decorations, and waited for his arrival. A little after 10, Alex entered. It was very dark, as I made the last-minute decision to cut out the lights before he arrived. He called my name a few times, but of course I didn't respond. I heard him walking around a bit, looking around the shop for me. I could barely hold back my laughter. But after more shuffling, I heard Alex speak in a defensive tone. "Not funny, dude." I looked around, but there was definitely no way he could see me right now, even if I had twitched or anything. I continued to play dumb. "Come on, man," he repeated again, sounding angrier this time. "That's not funny." Confused, I quietly adjusted a nearby stack of boxes so I could peer through the crack towards his voice. I couldn't make out his shape very well, but I knew for sure he was not looking in my direction. Suddenly my phone rang. I heard Alex turn towards the sound instantly. I froze, giddy with excitement that the plan might be working. But as he approached, I realized he wasn't holding his phone, and a wave of disappointment fell over me as I discovered my prank had been ruined by another caller. "Alright, fine, you got me," I announced shortly after the phone stopped ringing, taking off my mask and stepping out into the open. But Alex's face didn't look relieved. His face twisted in such horror in a way that I had never seen before. He began yelling and spouting panicked words, and I spent the next few minutes trying to get him to calm down. He explained to me that when he entered the store, a man in a clown costume was staring at him and then began slowly walking towards him. But when my phone rang, the man had dashed right out of the store. Alex had no idea that I was actually hiding in the back of the store the whole time. I don't want to think about what could have happened if Alex had showed up late that night, or if my other friend had never called during the prank.
You